morning, Father Con.
Hi, Adriana. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. You know, it's crazy times. We're in another lockdown again.
But Canadians have no idea what lockdown means compared to what your other Europeans or other people in the world have gone through. So, anybody who's going to complain to me about this current lockdown, I'm going to say you don't know what you're talking about.
How is the lockdown in the UK?
It's really tough. I mean, the Prime Minister has he has mapped out how the month of April things are gradually going to reopen again. But also they're much further ahead with the vaccines than we are. So they're now, I think, down to the age of 50. People in their 50s or maybe even younger than that are being vaccinated, are receiving the vaccine. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's another lockdown, but like you said, other places are stricter.
Absolutely. So, and I mean, at the risk of having people throw things at the computer if they're watching this, if you've been watching sort of what's happening around the world, if we want to get those numbers down, we have unfortunately, and I know nobody wants to hear this, we have to distance.
Yeah.
We have 2 cases in the parish of 2 families that have had COVID. Both families, the COVID came in. It's the variant in both of them, and in both cases, I think it was Dad who brought who first contacted the virus.
Right.
And it's interesting. One family got through it very well, but another family, the youngest kid, who's about 8 or 9 years of age, ended up in the hospital for several hours.
Yeah, I hear the variant can be worse.
Family were had more symptoms than the first. So this stuff is real. It's young people in intensive care, and it seems that with the variant, it's taking. The reason why the hospitals are concerned is that it's taking longer for people to recover. So I must say I find the approach frustrating, but that's getting into politics and
that's not
into trouble.
Yes.
If you follow the example of some place like Australia and New Zealand, with their much stricter approach, they can cut the numbers down in 2 weeks, where it's going to take us a month or 2 months.
Yes. Yeah.
To get it down. So, I think the frustration level of people is going to get higher, but we have to stop and ask ourselves why. If we know that it helps to, when people distance, when that distancing helps, why are we not putting in place the mechanisms to be able to do that? I mean, 2 weeks of a total lockdown, and we would have the numbers.
Yes.
Maybe down to a third.
You know, this real world experience of the pandemic, I think, drives home the point of what we're going to be talking today, because it is, at the time of this recording, it is Saturday, April 3rd. It is Easter Vigil. It's the day where, so we experienced Good Friday yesterday. We relived and, venerated the cross, or as much as we can in the pandemic time, venerated the cross, and Jesus has been laid in the tomb. And now, obviously, like, he's risen. We know that. But we are honoring the vigil, waiting for something to turn, waiting. And in the scriptures, we have the apostles are hiding because they don't know what's going to happen. Will the Romans come after them? will they be able to go on? What does it mean? They're in doubt, they're in shock. The apostles are like, what does it mean? We saw what Jesus did. How does it end here? And I'd like to think that the women probably lived the waiting a bit better because, women deal with pregnancy. Women are keeping the families together. So they probably lived a more hopeful kind of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all waiting. We can all relate to this.
Are you familiar with that lovely reading for Holy Saturday? It's from I'm not sure that we even know who the author is. It's in the breviary. It's in the Office of Readings, and it's a very dramatic beginning. The words are, "There is a great silence all over the world. The king is asleep." And what it does is it sets up Holy Saturday as that contemplative day where we wait for the king to awaken from his sleep. It's a lovely, lovely image. It's a lovely, lovely. It's a lovely metaphor, a lovely idea. So today should, there's a busyness about the day because we're getting ready for Easter, but in actual fact, all of that should have already taken place. That today is a day to gently go through the day, and today above all other days is a day where we wait.
And I think as you know, our culture does not wait very well.
Oh dear God, no.
We don't know.
We get heart palpitations if we were to wait too long.
Yeah, and we don't know how to wait. So I think this whole thing of waiting, and not that they stood by the tomb, but they were, the disciples were in the room because they didn't know what was going to happen. The women probably tending to the men and getting, doing what they needed to do. There were still children who needed to be fed. The women were probably taking care of maybe elderly parents or just, their communities, because we see that around the world, that women tend to be looking after the community in the waiting, and they help. Not to generalize, but women tend to help with the waiting. Mm-hmm. Some men do too. I don't want to generalize. I don't want to get people upset to say I'm stereotyping. But we don't know how to wait. And the whole, the other day, my husband and I watched The Social Dilemma. Finally.
Oh, good.
Now, a lot of that I knew because I was reading up on things like that because of work. But I find it interesting that now with the cell phones and devices, when you have to wait, okay, I'm going to entertain myself while I wait. And it's like we can't sit in silence, and we can't just wait. And I think that speaks of again, I'm not a psychologist or an academic. I haven't studied at length about this, but I think it says something about a real I want to say poverty in our ability to really access our humanity.
Do you know the story of Henry Nouwen and how he came across the painting of the prodigal son in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg? When he came across that painting for the first time, he writes about how he was it's a very large, we're used to seeing it in miniature, but it's huge. It's a very, very large painting. And he talks about how he sat on this leather bench and he sat for hours.
Yes.
Looking at the painting and observing how people were receiving the painting as they came across it in the art gallery. That's a very disciplined type of waiting, because I wonder if we've lost the art of doing that kind of waiting. That waiting is often, we're expecting something to happen. Waiting is waiting is, and something's going to come at the end of the period of waiting. But if you look at nature, just look at the whole process of giving birth, for example. There's a waiting that cannot be hurried.
Yes. Yes.
And you enter into it knowing that there is an end point, but that waiting itself is a journey. And I'm wondering if one of the arts that would be helpful for us, especially in the times that we're in, is to think again. What does it mean to wait? What does it mean? What is that? It's that we're going back again to this word, the contemplative experience. It's
yes, yeah.
How do we bring the contemplative experience back into everyday life? And I know some people will get all there, that religious language of that contemplative experience.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. It makes sense that there's a kind of waiting which you cannot rush.
No.
And there's a kind of waiting that needs, it's again coming to this word, time.
Mm-hmm. I think of the seasons, because I struggle, like many people out there, I struggle with winter and the cold, the shorter daylight hours. I struggle with all the darkness, the cold, the lifelessness of the trees. There's no vibrancy, and everything is like a brown gray when you look outside. But I have to remember, and of course now when it's becoming spring, I come alive. Mm-hmm. But I remind myself that even though the trees look dead, they are not dead. They're just living in their roots.
They're waiting.
They're waiting. They're waiting for the temperature and the atmosphere to change, and then it will activate them into life again. But they are not dead. They are living in their roots. And I find I draw, it may sound cliche or silly, but I draw my strength from nature. Because when I'm waiting, when things are not good, like right now with the pandemic, I want to come alive. I want to be vibrant. I want to get together with, I want to have dinner parties, and I want, conversation and food and drink and go out and see cousins. But we're waiting. But I just have to remember, maybe I need to live in my roots.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's down there? What kind of soil are my roots in? Is it good, nutrient-rich soil? Mm-hmm. What's feeding my roots that will help me when times are good, and then next time I experience something difficult?
Were you at the workshop at St. Jerome's University a few years ago when I've forgotten what the theme of the workshop was, but one of what the overall theme of the day was. But I remember one of the workshops that was presented was an opportunity to spend time with this very, very bright professor at the University of Waterloo, who's looking at the shadow side of all of the technology. Do you remember that?
No, I wasn't there.
And one of the exercises that he had was that those of us who are participating in his workshop, which was about 2 hours long, I think, as we went into the room, the auditorium where he was giving his presentation, everybody had to put their computer or their cell phone their into an envelope which was sealed and was kept by the security at the door. And Adriana, people were almost apoplectic. Even I was. I think I put up some resistance, and that was his point. That was his point. Was that he said if we're going to look at the shadow side, mm-hmm. We have to look at it unencumbered.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things that I noticed in the 2 hours that we were with him was that even I, every now and then, would put my hand down to where I would usually keep my cell phone.
Just a knee-jerk reaction to just
absolutely.
check.
And as he was doing a little bit of an evaluation of his session at the end, after the 2 hours, people were making those kinds of comments. That one of the interesting features of his workshop was that we had to be present to each other in a way we have rarely been present to each other over the last several years, and that there was no distraction, but we were distracted. We were distracted by the things that distract us because we didn't have the distractions.
Isn't that interesting?
Once we were able to get over that, then the quality time that was spent with each other, that people made some very, very interesting observations about after 30, 40 minutes, what started happening in the room. and how, again, in this waiting, it's almost like there's a reawakening to things that if we had all those devices with us, we probably wouldn't have been as aware of.
Interesting. It's almost in The Social Dilemma. So they're doing the documentary, but they're sort of showing a family and the various members and their addiction and the darker side of the technology. And so the mother, the oldest daughter, is, everyone's so addicted to their phones. Let's have a nice meal. So the mother says, you know what, for dinner, come on, we're going to collect your phones and we're going to put it in a container. And she could lock it for a set amount of time. So she locked all the cell phones in this container and timed it for an hour. So it wouldn't unlock for another hour. And it was the youngest daughter who, because they could hear the dings, through the glass, and they would look over and the mother would remind them, no, you'll get it after dinner. And it was the youngest daughter who went and smashed the container to get her phone.
Yeah.
And just, their relationship with the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting. And I always, so this waiting, and even my husband points out, we're too reliant, and we do it out of boredom. I check my phone. I'm not a CEO. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, a world-class, heart surgeon or neurosurgeon where, I need to be on call. And yet I check the phone. Oh, what emails? Oh, let me just get rid of, I could just learn to live with it.
That's
just
right. And
there.
It could have waited for another hour or two.
And so my husband has come up, and I fully support it, and it's a great idea, that when we're in the living room together, no cell phones.
Yeah.
We
I
talk.
have that rule for if I have friends in for dinner, they know not to no cell phone. Yeah. And I remember a few times people have. I want to show you something, and the finger goes up. No.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, we'll do it afterwards. But while we're at the table, no.
Yeah. Let's talk.
We're not going to do that. So, yep. Sorry.
I was going to say, but with the waiting, there are some pitfalls with the waiting. We can either, as I found a lovely article by Father James Martin in America Magazine that he wrote 4 years ago for Easter Vigil. And he talks about the danger of, when we wait and we don't have hope, we can fall into despair. And kind of like, oh, nothing's ever going to change, and we could just kind of give into despair. And I would push that even to say we can turn cynical and skepticism and treat cynicism and skepticism as if it's enlightened. And I don't think there's anything enlightened about cynicism or skepticism.
No.
And then he talks about a passive waiting, kind of like the people like, whatever. And he said, as Catholics, as Christians, we are called to wait with faithful hope.
Yeah.
And kind of like what you mentioned at the beginning, the expectant waiting, kind of like women who are pregnant. They know that, yes, we're waiting, but things are happening as they, morning sickness, and their bodies are changing. The hormones are, you never mess with a pregnant woman, or so we're told. And they know that at some point then the baby will be born and all the hope then can be realized. But then you're also waiting for the child to start walking, for the child to start talking, for the child to go to school, for the child to, there's always these markers of events that we're waiting for. So which tells me that we're just on a spectrum of events, and it's the in-between time.
Yeah, I love that. That I love that that idea of the in-between time. Mm-hmm. There's a lovely reading in the Old Testament scriptures from the book of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die. And for me, I think that's the in-between time. You're absolutely right, and James Martin is absolutely right. It's very, very easy to turn in.
Yeah.
To turn the experience to go into that gray place, Mm-hmm. Is the glass half empty, or is the glass half full? So which are you? Are you a glass half empty person, or a glass half full person? And I think that when we're being pulled in, the jaws of the black dogs, especially when we're being pulled into that place, that's where we need good friends. That's where we need the strength and the courage to be able to say, wait a minute, I can't afford to go here. I can't afford to spend time. Again, it's this spiritual word, discipline. Mm-hmm. that we shouldn't be afraid of the need to have that discipline in our lives, that when we find ourselves being pulled into that gray place, to remind ourselves that maybe what's happening right now is we're in this in-between time. There's a young priest who was a follower of Charles de Foucauld did he did a gorgeous line drawing, which I have somewhere, of it's the story of the prodigal son. Mm-hmm. And it's his imagining the father and the son coming together. And of course, the gospel story is very, very descriptive and is very full. And the father is waiting for the son to return. The son comes back and is very contrite. Yes. And I think that he does a beautiful thing in this very, very simple black and white drawing, in that when he shows the father and the son embracing each other, there's a distance between the two bodies. They're pulled in by their shoulders and their heads. Yes. But the tummies,
they're not touching.
There's that distance, and it's that in-between time, because while the father is so overwhelmed and so filled with joy that the son has come back, the son is going, hang on a minute here. I'm the bad son. I'm the black sheep of the family here. Like, what's up with this old man? Doesn't he fully appreciate that I threw everything back at him? I threw everything in his face. I abandoned him. I left him. And for me, in that lovely illustration, that in between time is the time and the space that they need to bridge that unfinished business. When you scratch the surface, mm-hmm. The father is rejoicing because the son has come home. But you can be sure that somewhere in the back of the father's mind is the question, and how long will he stay this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so while on the surface it appears that everything is fine, everything is good, everything is great, let's have a party.
Mm-hmm.
There's this in between that we need to work on. And I think all our lives we're waiting for something to happen. We're all,
Yeah.
it's not all a Hollywood beautifully wrapped ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
Waiting is a very, very important part of our lives. And I think in the waiting there is a lot for us to learn. There's a life lesson that comes with the waiting.
Yes. When you mentioned the Hollywood, I used to say when I was in my undergrad, life is not a Disney movie.
No, it's not.
Disney movie, it's the happy ending, it's everything. And then in our waiting, we're waiting for whatever, life to get better, for our relationships to improve, life to get better at work, or we're waiting for the promotion. We're waiting. And we could have expectations of what the end of that waiting will look like. And then I think related to the waiting is what ends up happening may not be how we envisioned it. So how do we, who knows what the apostles were expecting or the women were expecting?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the hope that Father James Martin says we are to live with, that Christian hope, is to know that God will surprise us.
Absolutely.
And things might not be the way we envision them to be, but they might be better. They might just completely astound our expectations, and it could end up being better.
Absolutely. Can I quote something? Can I read something to you?
Of course.
So we had an evening service last evening, which was beautiful. Some beautiful, gorgeous music, but the text that we used for the service was a slightly edited version of the Stations of the Cross that were written by youth 18 to 30 for Pope Francis, I think in 2015. It had to do with the Synod on Youth. And so I was working with it. I was working with the text for about a week, mm-hmm. and just cobbling it into the structure for the service last night, and I think that this is a lovely illustration of how sometimes when you're open, something just leaps out at you've been looking at it, and something just leaps out at you, and you go, "Oh my God, that's wonderful!" And actually, this happened last night at the service. Yeah. So here's the quote, and it was a young person, somewhere between the age of 18 and 30. I don't quite know who. They're not identified. Yeah. They wrote this.
Okay.
So it is very beautiful. The scandal of the death of God's Son, a sinner's death, a criminal's death, grants us the grace to discover amid sorrow your resurrection, amid suffering your glory, amidst anguish your salvation. And the cross itself, which speaks to us of humiliation and pain, is now revealed thanks to your sacrifice, as a promise that from every death new life will arise. And in every dark place light will shine. And so we can cry out, "Hail, Holy Cross, our one hope."
Wow, that's beautiful.
Isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that
so beautiful?
Isn't that beautiful? I mean, it speaks of them, so somebody coming into our church on Good Friday might say, "Oh, what is that cross doing here? Isn't that a symbol of death and torture?" Mm-hmm. And yet we're gathered around it. The whole day is focused on the meaning of the cross. But I love what it says. And the cross itself, which speaks to us of humiliation and pain, is now revealed, thanks to your sacrifice, as a promise that from every death, new life will arise. And in every dark place, light will shine. And so we can cry out, "Hail, Holy Cross, our one true hope." Again, that idea of waiting and hope. That to see in our waiting, if our waiting is a waiting that's caused by grief, if it's a waiting that's caused by pain and hurt and darkness, I think that's where that lovely line, "Say to the darkness, you have no power over me." I think that's where that comes in. And and then again, in our spirituality, to be able to call on the question, "Lord, allow me to see the light here." Allow me to gaze on the light. That lovely image of John of the Cross, which we spoke about several weeks ago, when, he's in the pit, he's thrown in by his confreres, he's thrown into the pit, left to, because he speaks the truth. And so he, they think that, his confreres think that this will be good for him. It will be a good discipline. It will teach him to come around to our way of thinking. And there's despair, like, what is happening? What's going on here? But John, in this dark experience, the dark night of the soul, John turns it, because he knows that into this darkness light will come. And so my hope in the darkness is that I will see the light. If Good Friday and Holy Saturday is about anything for the Christian community, it's to remind us that on our day-to-day journey, there's hope and despair, light and life, light and darkness, life and death. And that death is not just about death as in dying, but that death is also about rising. The death of, we all experience death in our lives, the death of a friendship, the death of a relationship, the death of a dream, the death of a career. And but because we're Christian, our question always, and Lord, help me to see the light in this.
I think as we're talking, another crucial point comes up. So when we did our Holy Thursday service on Thursday morning, I talked about how if, we all want to be understood. We all want someone to understand what we're going through. And I said, this is the week where we understand that Jesus gets us, that God gets us. And I borrowed from you that the week starts off with exuberant and, oh, Hosanna and Jesus, we love you. And then how quickly things turn. And so he experienced the best of humanity, of being received and accepted, and then the worst of humanity. And I said, God gets us. And so the one thing, especially in grief is, I'm thinking back to when I lost my brother 20 years ago this November. The utter despair you can feel, the emptiness, just that pain of missing someone and knowing you'll never see them again. And I think the message with the Triduum, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and then the amazingness of the empty tomb and, conquering death. In our waiting, God is with us. What is balm for the soul is to know you're not alone in that grief, in that waiting, in that pain, that someone is sitting with you. And that's usually what's comforting. Because when my brother died, my best friend that I've known since I was 10, she dropped her life, like she just dropped everything because she lives in Ottawa, and she came. Her parents live not far. Well, used to live not far from my mom, and she stayed with them, and she was there every day for a week, and she would show up in the morning at my mom's house where I was and my brother Mark, and she would come with coffee and muffins every morning. And then if we needed to go, order flowers or do any errands for the funeral, she's like, here, I'll drive, because, you're grieving, and, you can just have the space to be where, in the mental, emotional space you need to be in. I'll take care of the driving, and I'll look for the parking, and I'll take you there. And just to know that someone is there with you, taking care of you in that pain, that's God.
Yeah.
And I think that's the awesomeness of faith.
Yeah, we are not alone. God is with us. Yeah, it's that simple. It's that simple. And to not be, there's no need to be afraid. To see, that's the gray. That's when we have to say, no. You're not going to have power over me. To be able to sit. It's funny sometimes. I think we've probably talked about this in the past, but sometimes I think we have to go outside of ourselves, and we have to go outside of our own comfort zone to see something happening somewhere else, and so that we have the aha moment.
Yes.
And for me, the travel has been. I've been blessed for many years with opportunities to travel to very interesting places, both for work and for pleasure. But I learned so much traveling in Asia about how people manage time and how waiting is an art. In the same way that eating is, it's not just something essential for us, but it's a great art as well. That time, I learned a lot about what it means to just be comfortable with the time that is necessary in that experience of waiting, and how productive it can be. How you as a person, I got very sick when I was traveling in India, and it was sick from exhaustion. That typical North American, I have to get this done now because I have an agenda. But that's not how people live. That's not how people do things. And part of the exhaustion was the stress that I was causing myself, because things weren't moving as fast as I wanted them to move. So I had to just zen out, calm down for about 4 days, 5 days. And I remember having a lovely conversation with a lady who taught meditation in a center very close to the hotel where I was staying in India, and she said, I can feel your heart racing here. Slow down, wait.
Wow.
You don't.
But you don't understand. You don't understand. Have you heard of the slow movement?
Oh, yeah.
It's about 10, 15 years ago.
And the slow food movement,
yeah,
too.
Slow food movement. I remember reading the book by Carl Honore, who talked about the slow movement and how people can be frustrated, especially from the Western world, because the whole thing was, you grow your own food and you wait for, as your guests are there, you wait together as the food is prepared, and then you eat, and then you slow down. You don't rush the meal. And he points out that even eating at a slower pace is better for our bodies.
Oh yeah.
And it's just interesting
watch how people eat in Italy. Watch an Italian family have pranzo on Sunday. We wolf it down because they take their time, leisurely. I think, oh my God.
You know, I've got to say, I love that. When we did our honeymoon in Rome, we ended the last 2 or 3 days was with my family, my aunt and uncle, and they live outside of Rome. And it was Christmas time or New Year's. So, you know, the family was there. And when we sat to eat, you don't rush the meal, and then you stay at the table and all you do is talk and laugh. And I was very impressed because my cousin's kids, they were, the daughter at the time was about 15. The son was maybe around 11. No cell phones. They stayed there and they were part of the conversation. Even though they didn't really know English, they stayed. And I was the only one having a cell phone, only for translating purposes.
Yeah.
Because I could sort of speak Italian. My cousins could speak English. My aunt and uncle don't speak English. My husband doesn't speak Italian. So we needed a translation, but you know, we made it work, and everybody was there, and we laughed and we ate and we drank and it was slow. Nothing was rushed.
Yeah. Adriana, we've been going at this over 41 minutes.
Yes. So maybe we should wrap it up there. So blessings on your waiting.
Thank you very much, and you too.
Yes, and for all those watching, blessings on your waiting and your Easter. And for those of you who feel apprehensive to feel joy, I think God with Easter is giving us permission to feel joy. Because sometimes we're scared to hope because we don't want to be disappointed. So maybe that's why we fall into a whatever, or because we're holding ourselves back. But God is giving us permission to enjoy joy and hope with reckless abandon.
Absolutely. That's a lovely way to end.
So happy Easter,
Easter,
everyone.